Thank you all for the invitation to be here. I'm going to be talking about aquatic invasive species today and some imminent threats that are on the horizon in three different ways, actually. And I put some information in the chat because we don't have a whole lot of time today. Links to more information on identification, on reporting, on clean, drain, dry, prevention information, as well as the species more in depth that we'll be talking about. So really appreciate it. I'm going to jump right in. State of Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife has three main species of concern, two of which are actually lumped together, so I guess you could say four. We're going to talk about each briefly, about the imminent threat that each presents us today, as well as some opportunities for working together to address these problems. Going to move relatively quick through some of the background information on each, but again, I put that link in the chat and really want to get to the opportunities to work together on these common problems. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time on some of the threats. Quagga and zebra mussels are not yet present in the state of Washington and are mostly not yet present in the Pacific Northwest, with the exception of the state of Idaho today. In this, you can see the background and the life cycle of invasive mussels, as well as the comparison between invasive mussels in the freshwater environment and our own native mussels. So you can see the substantial size difference between the adults. And then you can also see the byssal threads, which are the hair-like and concrete-like hard threads that allow these invasive freshwater mussels to attach to hard surfaces, which is really some of the problems that we're anticipating. You can also see the different cycles of the life. And what's worth noting is that different stages of the life cycle of these invasive freshwater mussels, they're actually not visible to the human eye. So the free-floating veligers, the swimming larvae are not actually visible. When we think about prevention, that's why we're thinking about the mantra of clean, drain, and dry, letting all the water drain out of your boat, of your equipment, of anything that could contain water, because some of these threats could be microscopic. Ultimately, the invasive mussels were introduced to North America through contaminated ballast water and commercial ships, but they've been spreading across the nation, both west as well as north and south, through the movement of different aquatic conveyances like recreational watercraft, but we're also seeing more and more non-traditional pathways of movement, such as construction equipment or floating products. Why are we really concerned about this? Of all the different invasive species the state of Washington's analyzed, the quagga and the zebra mussel pose the greatest economic and environmental risk of all. You can see visually here what we're really concerned about in terms of the invasive mussels attaching to hard surfaces. Thinking about irrigation systems, thinking about fish passage systems, fish hatcheries, anything that touches raw water is potential habitat and at risk. And you can see that both you see fouling on the outside of infrastructure as well as on the inside clogging pipes like a clogged artery. The state of Washington back in 2017 actually analyzed the potential risk to our hydroelectric facilities alone in Washington, and we're estimating over $100 million annually being spent to keep those systems functioning. We haven't been able to analyze the other infrastructure at risk, but long story short, anything that touches or involves raw water is at a similar level of risk. Thinking about fish hatcheries, irrigation systems, drinking wastewater systems, data centers, as well as navigational locks, which actually use pumps to move water up and down, as well as the gates themselves. We're also thinking about the indirect impacts, thinking about what establishment would mean to our state and to our resources. Thinking about shipping, for example, irrigated agriculture, outdoor recreation, as well as the value of fisheries. There's a lot at risk here. Beyond the economics of it, we're also thinking about the environmental risk. These mussels are filter feeders, so they're filtering out the positive nutrients, leaving the toxins. This is a huge problem with downstream effects, if you will, to overall water quality. We know that those changes in water quality will also lead to indirect impacts in native species, both habitat loss in terms of competition for resources, as well as indirect impacts where if a fishery, for example, were to be negatively impacted or potentially crash, that would then impact anything that then preys on those fish, like the southern resident killer whales. Beyond that, we're also thinking about human health concerns as well as cultural concerns. You can see these photos here, one from the Great Lakes with over a foot deep of razor sharp mussel shells on the shoreline. That's not a place we're going to want to be recreating, taking our families, and spending our time, both because they're razor sharp and also they smell terrible. And then thinking about the impacts to our way of life, we're really at risk of losing our sense of space. So much of our society is built upon water, interacting with water. Ultimately, that may change in a negative way for the long term. A status update of where we are today. For the first time, we can say that the Columbia River Basin is not free of invasive mussels. Over 2 decades of work from states, provinces, tribes, and local governments has protected the Columbia River Basin through a strategy of perimeter defense. In 2023, we were all very shocked when, through routine monitoring, the state of Idaho Department of Agriculture detected floating veligers in the free-flowing Snake River, and that was announced by Governor Brad Little at that time. The state of Idaho has performed a very aggressive rapid response treatment. However, in 2024, they found additional free-floating veligers in the Snake River. There's tremendous uncertainty about when they may reach our waters and when they may establish. We're doing a lot to detect them, which is a whole other conversation. But the point is that the free-floating Snake River from Washington's waters are 375 river miles from those waters. And this isn't the only threat that we're facing. Looking at all the red on this map, there are many other water bodies that are infested from quagga and zebra mussels, both. How do we prevent them? We prevent them through watercraft inspections and legal authorities requiring clean, drain, dry. The takeaway here is that for years we've been inspecting vessels at our borders. We've been intercepting invasive quagga and zebra mussels for a very long time. Just this year, we're already up to 6. This is a little out of date. So the call to action is to clean, drain, dry, and then we'll get into some of the other opportunities in a moment. The other threat is one that's not necessarily new, but it is an imminent threat to certain parts of our waters. The European green crab, globally invasive species, found in the nearshore environment. We're seeing more and more that we're seeing evidence of eelgrass damage, for example, which is problematic for a lot of different ways. And in other areas in the United States, we're seeing significant destruction of shellfish. They can eat up to 40 clams in a day on the East Coast, which has effectively crashed their soft-shelled clam industry. Where are we at in Washington? In 2022, Governor Jay Inslee declared an emergency, mobilizing all state agencies to work with co-managers, tribes, and partners to address this threat. Since that time, we've been working with over 40 different co-managers, tribes, and partners, including many of you here, to address this problem. One of suppression, where they're very widespread and not likely to be eradicated. One of early detection monitoring, where they're not known to be, as well as suppression, where they're just becoming established so that they don't take hold long term. The thing to note is that Southern Hood Canal and Southern Puget Sound are not yet infested. You'll note in the map on the right that in Cultus Bay, there is a detection, which is most southern at this point in Puget Sound, but the imminent threat is one of them spreading further into Puget Sound as well as one at Hood Canal. We're doing everything we can to address this through a legislatively required new 6-year management plan. This is kind of a guidebook of best practices, taking all that knowledge of how this really is most effectively accomplished, publishing that information in writing so that new organizations can learn from it, as well as documenting where those over 40 co-managers, tribes, and partners intend to work and what they intend to do so that we can identify those common goals and then reach them together. And the third is one of northern pike, which is an invasive predator fish. It's unique in that it's not invasive in the whole United States. However, you can see on the upper right map that it is invasive and introduced in much of the West, including the state of Washington. They are significant predator fish, apex predators, and they are very close to the anadromous portion of the Columbia River. There's a lot of effort going towards stopping that and suppressing those populations. However, we are an imminent threat from increased spread and devastating effects of predation. So getting into the opportunities, which is really where would like to focus today with the remaining time. Number one is that we as a state have submitted our state federal appropriations requests. We have made the request for an $8 million appropriation to the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs for their existing invasive species grant program. Realizing that European green crab is a huge problem, we actually identified in our management plan what the annual need is for European green crab alone. We also realized that all these other priorities, as well as many other Northwestern priorities, are also very key and need to be addressed. So we are requesting Congress to appropriate $8 million annually for management for Northwestern regional priorities. Really excitingly, the affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians recently passed a resolution calling for this as well. If you're interested in European green crab, we, through our federal appropriations requests, have funding from the U.S. National Atmospheric, Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, and we are currently seeking applications for awards to tribes as well as other entities for up to $1 million over 3 years, focused on trapping, early detection capacity building, training, as well as monitoring. Applications are going to be due May 5th, and then there's a process to review and rank those proposals with the intent to have awards announced by June 2nd so that we can have agreements in place starting July 1. If you're interested in learning more about this, please contact Raquel Crozier, and we have a PDF on our website with much more information I'd be happy to share. In fact, I'll try to drop it in the chat before I need to run today. Pause a minute in case you're screenshotting this. And then finally, thinking about opportunities to address northern pike, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has a current comment period about a federal cost share program to suppress northern pike in Washington as well as Idaho. The comments are due April 27th, and ultimately the Coeur d'Alene tribe as well as the Upper Columbia River tribes are able to participate in this, as well as the state of Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. You can see the scope on the map kind of in high resolution. Ultimately, if you're interested in stopping northern pike and preventing these impacts, this is a great opportunity to do so. With that, I believe I've got a couple minutes to take questions if anyone has them, but here's my contact information as well. And really appreciate your time raising awareness of some of these threats, as well as the imminent threat they pose, as well as some opportunities for us to work together to address them. Thank you all, and Joey, any questions?